After my last video, thank you for watching, by the way. A lot of you said I should do more of the talking head format. And while I am thrilled that my face doesn't terrify you, I have to warn you that it's just not going to happen that frequently because my setup is so unserious and it is a pain in the ass to put together. This light is not even like a camera light. It's just my bedside lamp with a bulb change hanging out on my pillow. And this is just my phone being held up by a stool, a stack of books, and the power of prayer. I'm not saying it's never going to happen, just that I only whip out full-length talking heads when it's an emergency, and I considered the Oscars discourse to be a bit of an emergency. Just so you know, with everything going on in the world, I don't actually think discourse about the Oscars qualifies as a real emergency. I'm being facetious. Free Palestine. So on November 8th, I had an idea on Patreon and I shared it with my patron. The idea was this. It is so rare for Black women in any capacity to be allowed the freedom and grace to be vulnerable, to be angry, to just express their emotions as messy as they are. And that's especially true for Black women in the spotlight. And this became especially clear to me shortly after Megan Thee Stallion released her single Cobra, which I listened to so much in the final weeks of 2023 that it defied the odds and somehow ended up on my Spotify Wrapped. So I don't want to say it's legend shit, but I just, I'm her. My idea was that Megan's willingness to be vulnerable while being in such a position was nothing short of amazing. What I mean by that is, yes, it's difficult for all Black women across the board, no matter the status or the industry, what have you. But there's just another level to it when you're a Black woman in the spotlight and people expect a certain thing from you. And in Megan's case, what a lot of people expect is just party songs and just fun. I remember hearing or seeing a lot of people discuss Cobra after it came out, and they'd be like, oh, it's a good song, I'm happy for her. But I just want another body. I just want another WAP. I just want another Savage. And boy, that really struck a nerve with me. And that got me thinking about how women in rap are perceived, particularly Black women. I'm sorry to all you Igazillia stands out there, but couldn't even. Oh, one of you? Sorry, that's mean. That's mean. So Megan getting to be confident and like rap songs about being that bitch, and also rap songs about being depressed and feeling like she's not enough. That to me is very bold as a Black woman in the industry who people perceive as only being good for just one thing. I held off on making that video though, because in my mind, the thinking happens. I was like, but she's gonna release another single, maybe even a whole album, and then we could explore Traumazine and this album and those themes. So just waited, I waited, and my God, was it worth the wait. But I just put this little ditty in at the beginning just to say that most of what you're about to hear and see was written and put together before his came out, so it's not really going into detail about the beef, though I will add an addendum near the end. But this is really just a video about the importance of Black women getting to be vulnerable. Okay, enjoy the show. Bye. And of course I am afraid. Because the transformation of silence into language in action is an act of self-revelation, and that always seems fraught with danger. But my daughter, when I told her of our topic and my difficulty with it, said, tell them about how you're never really a whole person if you remain silent, because there's always that one little piece inside you that wants to be spoken out. And if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter and hotter. And if you don't speak it out one day, it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside. I have to admit, it's always been a little hard for me to be open about my feelings, to be vulnerable, and to acknowledge my emotions, especially when they're volatile. It's so easy for me to, when I'm happy, say that I'm happy and to smile and laugh, because that emotion is very easy for people to digest. And when I say people, I don't just mean acquaintances or strangers or colleagues. I mean close friends, family members. I can't tell you how many times I've been sad or upset and felt like I had to swallow it down and mask it, because being sad sad just wasn't acceptable. And even when I'm not sad, I always feel this pressure to maintain a smile and keep up with all of these exhausting fake laughs, because my neutral face is almost always interpreted as being aggressive. Now, everyone, regardless of race or gender, can struggle with so-called resting bitch face. Women are more likely to be singled out for it, hence the bitch. But black women, in my experience, are more likely to be ridiculed for it. Bear with me while I take you on a journey of my personal life. I remember at one of my first jobs, myself and another coworker, we both had RBF. The difference was that she was white passing and I am me. We were both pretty quiet, mostly kept to ourselves, so I found it really surprising when my manager pulled me aside one day to tell me that a customer had complained about me and my attitude. I later asked my other RBF coworker if she'd ever been pulled aside for a similar reason, and she told me she hadn't. For that customer, even though we were both working that day, even though we both interacted with them, even though we were both quiet and our neutral faces tended to be perceived negatively by most, I was the angry one. I was the one with an attitude problem. Things like that have honestly made it difficult for me to feel comfortable expressing anger because people always think I'm angry. And I hate the idea that in the back of my mind, I think that if I just express anger, people will look at my anger and say, see, she's always angry, always so aggressive, always this, always that. For black women in particular, this insidious pressure to always put on a happy face is exacerbated by the fact that when we do express emotions like sadness or anger, people tell us to calm down or to stop being so aggressive, or say that we're whining or we're ungrateful. And we're so often encouraged to just stifle our emotions because even if we politely correct someone's behavior, we're treated again like we're the aggressor.
Oh, I can already smell the roasting of a Christmas. Oh, Elise, did you respond to the email that was CC'd to everyone?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, great. Okay, next time just respond a bit earlier. I would really appreciate that because you tend to be a bit late.
Okay, yeah, that's fine, but I don't appreciate the tone you're speaking to me in.
Whoa,
relax.
I mean,
Hey,
it's
whoa,
not that big of a deal.
Take a
Whoa.
I just don't appreciate how you've spoken to me.
You don't have to get an attitude with me. I'm just trying to let you know.
Deep breath.
We don't
have.
Oh
my goodness. Oh my God. Take a deep breath. Calm down. Oh my goodness, no need to take a chill pill.
Police. Hi. This is a professional working environment.
I know this is just a joke, but the fact that it rings so real for so many black women speaks volumes. Sadly, even my closest loved ones have accused me of not having a good time or not being happy or not wanting to be in a place because my face was relaxed. It makes social situations all the more draining because I have to be mindful of my expression. I have to actually smize like I'm on America's Next Top fucking model, because if I don't, I'm an asshole. My point in all this is to say that it's really hard to be vulnerable, to allow yourself to be sad, angry, because too often a black woman with emotions other than happiness is perceived negatively or written off entirely. And that's what makes Megan Thee Stallion's Cobra and her album Traumazine not only refreshing, but for me personally, reassuring. In her song Cobra, Megan Thee Stallion laid bare all her troubles and all her trauma. In the song, she raps about being depressed to the point of suicidal ideation and nursing her sorrows with alcohol and partying. She even makes a reference to people not seeing her partying as a sign of trouble.
He pouring me shots, thinking it's lit. Ha, little did he know.
This line, as well as Megan's own acknowledgement of not being recognized as someone who can be hurt or as someone who can be vulnerable, is just one example of how Megan gives voice to the experiences of black women encouraged to stifle our emotions. Hip-hop is a genre where braggadocio reigns supreme, being the greatest, having the most, opulence, excess, decadence. Although these themes make frequent appearances in the genre, that is, of course, only one facet of it. Rap leaves plenty of room for songs with all sorts of subjects, songs about struggling with money, about feeling alone, about love, family issues, mental health, or songs that are just about coming to terms with the regularness of life.
Sim's an artist or Sim be the person. To you I'm smiling, but really I'm hurting.
The hype songs often reign supreme for the simple reason that we all want to be hyped up. Dare I say, many of us even need to be hyped up for dealing with the aforementioned regularness of life. I'm sorry, I think it's just time for a rewatch. And when I say all of us, I also mean the people doing the rapping. I most often listen to Meg's hype songs when I want to feel better than I actually feel. I listen to her when I do my makeup if I really want to feel like a baddie, or I listen to her before a big event in my life so I really feel like I'm her. her. If I had a nickel for every time I did a her needle drop in one of my videos, I would have 3 nickels. And that isn't a lot, but I should probably stop. It's getting old. Megan has been through so much in her life already, and when she really began to pop off in 2020, she quickly became known as that girl. You could listen to Megan's songs to party, to feel good about yourself, to be braggadocious. So I was surprised and touched when I realized that the same reason we listen to those hype songs is often the same reason artists make them. During the press for Traumazine, Megan gave an interview where she stated that writing the songs on Traumazine was the first time she was able to write songs that were honest about how she felt and how the songs she became known for weren't always reflections of that.
I was so on edge about the album because this is like the first time I've ever been so personal. And this is like the first time I've ever treated my music like this. Like usually I write music and I'm like, okay, I'm sad, but I'll write body. Or like, or you know what I'm saying? I'm upset. Okay, I'm writing freak nasty. Like, you know, but this is the first time I've like written music about how I like actually feel and not how I want to feel. I feel like on this album, it's probably the first time I figured out how to talk about what I want to say. Like I express myself a little bit more. Anxiety is not even a song that I felt like I wanted to write for other people. Like I wrote it for me, to me, kind of like to my mama a little bit. And it was rough, but I mean, I got through it and I just felt like, okay, like I got that off my chest.
And I just think there's so much power in that. One of the most often heard pieces of advice when it comes to gaining confidence, or at least the advice that I most often received, was fake it until you make it. Pretend you are that bitch and you will feel like that bitch. For Megan, these songs are equal parts her getting to be proud of herself, actually feeling like she's untouchable, and also trying to embody the person she wants to be on the days where she maybe doesn't feel so proud of herself. In this way, Megan gets to sort of manifest her own confidence, her own happiness, and there's so much beauty in that, and acknowledging both the good and the bad that comes with humanity. And it only makes Traumazine even more important because it's an album where she does take the time to be proud of herself and to allow herself to not feel great and to be vulnerable about not feeling great, instead of feeling the pressure to continue to suppress the bad feeling and fake it till she makes it.
They keep saying I should get help, but I don't even know what I need.
On Traumazine, Megan explores her deteriorating mental health, her depression, her anxiety, and how people often assume she's fine because she is, after all, a strong Black woman. Black women have struggled for decades to be seen as needing help or being vulnerable, due in large part to the countless stereotypes and caricatures that have permeated public perception. The mammy, the Jezebel, and the soft focus today, the sapphire. Historically, when we look at the idea of Black women being strong and the collection of caricatures, it's often rooted in the Eurocentric idea that Black people don't feel pain. The so-called father of modern gynecology, James Marion Sims, did horrific experiments on enslaved Black women without the use of anesthesia or any other form of pain prevention. Racial bias in the medical field has led to countless cases of Black patients either being ignored or left untreated because doctors believed they didn't feel pain, or at least didn't feel the pain they said they did. This is a big problem in medicine and part of the reason why the mortality rate of Black women trying to give birth is so high in the United States especially. If anyone hasn't seen Aftershock, I highly recommend it, although I do caution that it's tough to watch. Over the decades, the schema of the strong Black woman came to mean a woman who was no nonsense and determined, which then turned into an idea that saw Black women as a superwoman, as opposed to women who just had no choice but to be resilient in a tumultuous landscape. Although Black women are just as likely to struggle with their mental wellness as their white peers, for a long time they were less likely to reach out for help. It's a perfect storm of distrust in the medical system, with its history of doctors like James Marion Sims and implicit bias against Black patients, the impossible idea of a strong Black woman, and general stigma against mental health issues that informs a lot of Black women to just be silent about their struggles and to power through it instead of reaching out for help. The strong Black woman is a caricature who doesn't need anything from anyone, doesn't want anything from anyone, and be it literally or figuratively, doesn't feel pain. This trope is just as complex as the topic of sex and hip-hop, because on one hand, as Black women, we do know that we're strong and resilient and that we can endure things, which can be good, but it can also feel like having to live up to an impossible standard. It can feel like you're completely defeated, because some days, I have to admit, I don't feel like being strong. And also, Being strong doesn't mean being invincible. Get that through your thick fucking skull. When I heard Cobra, I thought it was amazing, not just sonically and lyrically, but here she was making a song about everything she'd been through and rapping passionately about the fact that, hey, I'm depressed and sometimes I drink to numb the pain, but no one really notices, which is why it was so strange and upsetting to hear Megan be open and vulnerable about hiding her real feelings behind what she wants to feel, and then hearing people shy away from that honesty because that's not what they want from her. I don't know, it's kind of surreal. It's almost like a cycle of some sort. Black women, Megan included, experience that dismissal of their emotions in the real world. Megan challenges that, is vulnerable, and while some people are fine with it, others either dismiss it because they want a happier song or they turn the tables on Meg and condemn her for having feelings. But by simply being open in her music, Megan ends up unpacking a lot about how Black women are perceived and portrayed.
It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to open up. It's okay to be honest about how you're feeling.
One of my favorite tracks from Traumazine is Not Nice. It's a really laid back, old school type of beat, but the words are hard hitters. Megan describes it as a song about how she's unapologetically her, but people seem to want her to make herself smaller to appease them. And that includes being overly polite even when people are rude to her and not being proud, despite having done things that warrant being proud of herself. The chorus is her own admission that trying to keep up with what people expect of her is exhausting. Trying to plaster on a smiley face because when you're not smiling, people assume you're being aggressive is played out. You don't think I'm nice? Well, fuck it. I'm not.
Fuck it, bitch, I'm not nice. I'm the shit. I'm done with being humble cause I know that I'm that bitch.
And she's just done with masking her emotions and being overly polite and making herself smaller. And maybe she's even a bit angry that she had to do that at all. And boy, does it feel good to let that anger be felt. It's been talked about to death, so I don't want to bore you with it, but I do want to acknowledge how rage is used as liberation. Last year, I saw a lot of conversation about so-called female rage in media, and I didn't participate in it because the key thing I noticed was that this topic of female rage almost always centered a white woman, where a Black woman expressing anger is scarcely framed as being a good thing, and we can thank another harmful schema for that: the angry Black woman. On the album cover for Good News, a project released during the height of fuckery that was 2020, Megan is pictured surrounded by news cutouts, and one of the stories you can only partially read says, "For Black women who struggle against stereotypes and are seen as angry or threatening when we try to stand up for ourselves." Since debuting in the industry, Megan has been criticized for a lot. For her appearance, for her height, for her voice. Megan has been victim to many cases of misogynoir and colorism on account of not just her complexion, but her height. Tall Black women often face this barrage of nonsense from the world, with people speculating about their gender, saying they don't look feminine enough, all because they're tall. Case in point, Taylor Swift is taller than Megan, but no one has ever claimed she is hypermasculine because of that. The reason I say that, it's also in part due to colorism, is because we don't very often see people claiming Zendaya looks manly for being 5'10". Add expressing anger to that recipe and you've got people comparing you to animals. When Michelle Obama was in office, she was compared to an ape. With Megan currently being compared to Bigfoot, we see the same tropes continuing to play out. And man, am I fucking tired. I'll admit this video is kind of unorganized and a bit messy, but I don't know, I just wanted to express that because that's what stands out to me with Traumazine and Cobra, and I'm really excited for Megan's new project. But before I go, I did want to say that just because I'm highlighting Megan in this video doesn't mean other women in rap haven't been vulnerable in their music. We got Angel Hayes, Doechii, whose song This Bitch Matters gets into this a little bit, Glorilla, Sampa the Great, and of course the impeccable Little Sims, and that's not even mentioning the GOAT, the legend that is Queen Latifah.
Who you calling a bitch?
If that's not freely expressing anger and standing up for oneself, I don't know what is. I just admire Megan's ability to shed what's expected of her. Everyone else got to talk about what happened to her. Everyone else got to make jokes about it. So why should she pretend that she was fine? Why should she only make songs like Body or Savage? Why should she be silent? With her work, she has demonstrated how possible it is to stand in both, to be confident and not so confident, to be happy and to be sad, to be at peace and to be angry, to simply be human. Her work reads like a love letter to other Black women, a reminder that, hey, you're allowed to be human too. Because you are. And because fuck 'em.
That's right, there's only one Megan Thee Stallion.
Next tonight.